Welcome to the After Chat. I'm Michael.
I'm Ellis.
I'm Madison.
And today we are going to be talking about people who did not end well in the Bible.
Yikes.
There we go. You all ready?
Ready.
Yep.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the After Chat. Real questions. Real talk. Real life.
Okay, I have to know
So,
if you could eat one type of cookie, not like only eat cookies.
okay.
It's specifically one kind within the category of cookies for
Got
the
it.
rest of your life. Only one kind. What would it be?
So like a genie comes and says, you get one cookie for the rest of your life. One type of cookie. And this is the only cookie I'm going to get to eat forever.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to go two. But I only get one. All right,
Only
so
one.
the King Arthur brand, it comes in a box. It's a gluten-free cookie, but it's a legit good cookie mix. And it's chocolate chip cookie, King Arthur, gluten-free brand. There we go. I'm going to make those and eat them forever.
Okay.
Chocolate chip with walnuts. This one's easy.
There we go.
This one's easy. And like if I could create like the perfect conditions, like fresh out of the oven where the chocolate chips are still gooey.
There we
bro,
go.
that is
Yes.
top tier.
How do you feel about pecans?
They're okay. They're an okay substitute. They're not walnuts. Though.
That's how I feel about walnuts. Like, they're okay, but I would
Oh.
prefer ultimately pecans. Okay, my type of cookie that I would happily eat, only this kind for forever, is literally just the kind you get from the grocery store. It's like, I don't know, chalk. It's like plain sugar cookie with like
yeah,
icing on
yeah.
top and
Oh,
sprinkles.
where they just change
Yes.
it out for the
Yeah.
holidays.
Yes.
Or
Yeah,
whatever. Okay.
I don't know
like-
what they're called,
Yeah.
but they're those cookies.
It's a sugar cookie, yes. So like right now they're all red and pink for Valentine's Day. They're going to be green in a few weeks
And they're
for
going
St.
to
Patrick's Day.
stain my entire mouth green when I'm eating them.
Yeah. We got some with green and yellow icing. I'm not sure what that was for. I was like,
Green and yellow.
I don't get it.
Maybe it was like a football team?
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't
Beats
know.
me.
Probably St. Patrick's Day. When
Or
did you
St.
get them?
Patrick's Day.
It was like a few months ago. It was like in the fall, for sure. I don't.
Oh no, but those are good cookies.
They are pretty good.
If you're at the store, they're always tempting
Yes.
because they put them right there at the door.
I
And
feel like
they're-
it's a sleeper pick. That's a good pick.
They're
Yeah.
always just like, they're sort of good, but at least they're predictable.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to get one of those and be like, "Ugh, it cooked for too long. It's always
Yes.
the same. I know what to expect, so
No, that's a good one.
thank you.
All right. When was a time when you were at a crossroad and had to make a choice to go one way or another?
Okay. It's a metaphorical crossroad. But last year, my car broke down real bad. And I basically was given the option of I could replace the engine in the car, which was going to be a lot of money, or buy a new car. And it was a sad thing to spend money, but I made the decision to get a new car because the other one was just constant problems. And so far, my Honda Civic is tried and true, so I'm happy with my choice.
I feel like the Honda Civic is the Food Lion standard cookie of cars.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yes.
like super reliable. You
I
know
know what I'm
exactly
gonna
It's
get.
going to get you everywhere.
As
Yeah.
soon as I bought it too, I had like 5 like middle-aged men coming out of the woodwork and be like, "If you take care of it, that thing will last you 300,000 miles." I was
Long
like,
as,
okay.
as long as you change the oil and rotate them tires.
Yep. Yeah.
Nice. My college decision process was super lengthy. I think we visited it was like over 10 schools.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
wild. And I got it down to 2 that I was pretty on the fence about, right? And we went, we had visited both of them before. We went and did one final visit kind of thing. And while we were at the second one, I was like, I think this is it. And so we went to the admissions office and we were like, hey, we're ready to like commit or whatever. It's not like I was a Division I athlete or anything, whatever the frick you call it. Like that, I was like, yeah, let's go, let's do it right now. Sign me up for whatever. What do I sign? So yeah, that was it.
Admit me, please.
Yeah, admit me, please.
I come
Thank
to
you.
school here.
Accepting the letter, yes, good. So that was it. The rest is history.
Mine was like whenever I got out of the Army, like I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to go back home to Missouri or stay here in Virginia. And ultimately it just ended with, it'd be a big hassle to actually move 1,000 miles back across the country. And so I just kind of just crossed my fingers and chose to stay here.
I hate moving. I don't blame you.
It's the worst.
And I've moved states like as a baby, but I've moved counties, and even that will like upset my whole life and give me a meltdown. I hate moving so much.
So that was I was really just too lazy to move back to Missouri.
That's 100%
I think it's valid. Yeah, I do. I think
I
it's
remember
valid.
when we moved into our house, putting the last box down and looking at my wife and saying, we're going to die in this house because I never want to do this again. This is freaking terrible.
I do believe
Feet first is how
that
I'm
will happen.
So,
All right, so last one. What do you want to be remembered for? I think it's just someone that made my little spot where I happen to find myself slightly better than I left it, or
That's
like
good.
whenever I arrived.
I don't have it to back me up on this right now, but most of the time this happens. I wear 2 different earrings. I got bored with wearing matching earrings. So I would like to be remembered as the person that wears 2 different earrings because she had so many cool earrings, she couldn't stick to just one pair at a time.
nice.
That's your epitaph.
Yeah.
Okay.
Someone fun and aloof and excited about life and earrings.
There's worse things to have on your headstone.
Look, last episode I was wearing an eyeball in one ear and a frog in the other.
See, and I've noticed that. So, like, I noticed an eyeball earlier in the day, but I'm on this side of you, so it was a different one. I was like, and I kept thinking, when did she change that?
And I don't have any in today, but just ignore. I'm naked. Don't look at me.
See, the eyeball was on my side, and we were 15 minutes in, and I was like, is that an eyeball? What is
You don't
happening?
want to ask in the middle of
Yeah,
recording.
exactly.
Hey, wait a minute, what's that?
That is my eyeball. Thank you.
I think I would like to be remembered for honoring God and the things that He gave me to do and the people that He placed in my life. Simple as that.
That
I
one's
think
better
that pretty
than
much
mine.
covers all the bases, you know? So
That's a pretty good one.
Yes.
I should have gone for a legit one and not the eyeball.
I like the eyeball answer.
Okay, good.
I like the
Showing
earrings
us
answer.
up over there.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to be looking today at some people who did not end well. So we're going to start out the episode. We're going to each look at one person that, like we just said, didn't end well. Then we're going to look at someone who, yes.
Sorry, I felt like it needed
we
a sound
really
effect.
need to like put a picture of them, and then you make that sound before each person that we look at.
Or like a take, like, hold on, a reaction take. So hold on, say the first person that we're talking
gosh.
about.
All right, first we're gonna look at Haman.
And then you.
Oh, it's
Okay,
all a
here-
thing.
all right, hold on. Here we go.
Let's do
We're
it again.
gonna cue it up. Okay, so first person we're gonna look at is Haman. Okay.
Just kept spinning.
Oh, these chairs are notorious for moving. Okay, so there we go.
All right.
Okay, all right.
Let's hear about Haman.
Okay, so here we go. So we're gonna look at Haman, and he is the big bad from the book of Esther. All right, so who was Haman? So we're gonna hit you with some weird things. So Haman was an Agagite and the son of
Sorry.
Hamadatha. And that's really all you need to know. Haman was likely a descendant of Agag, king of the Amalekites, who were the longtime enemies of the Jewish people. This was a group of people that God had told King Saul to completely destroy centuries earlier, and you can read about that in 1 Samuel 15. But Saul failed to obey that command, and his disobedience eventually, all this time later, led to the loss of his kingdom, and by Esther's time, a threat to the annihilation of all of the Jews. So, one person not doing what they were supposed to do can cause ramifications and butterfly effects in all sorts of places. So, Haman was married to a woman named Zeresh, and they had 10 sons, and Haman was a close confidant of King...
Sorry.
Yes?
It's a lot of sons.
Yes.
Keep going.
I mean, and that's just the sons. I mean, no telling how many daughters were in there.
Yeah.
Haman was a close confidant of King Xerxes, and he was the one who came in and overthrew the Babylonians and all the things. So Haman took personally the fact that Mordecai, who is this big to-do guy in the area there, he wouldn't bow down to him. So Haman was being elevated among like all the nobles in King Xerxes' court, and so they had a big parade for him, as they do. And as he paraded past and walked by everybody bowed down, but Mordecai was like, nah. Like hit one of those situations like right there. Like did one of these. Like as
He
Haman,
said, I'm not doing it.
yes. And that's what happened.
Good for Mordecai.
Yes. Because, they weren't going to bow down to any earthly person. So, and Haman's intense hatred, I mean, this was like stewed forever. And so Haman's intense hatred for Mordecai reached a climax, prompting him to devise the most over-the-top plan, like in the history of plans, just because he got slighted by one person, like he just went completely off the rails. And he devised a plan that included the construction of a gallows that was like 75 feet high. Because he was so filled with spite and arrogance, he wanted to put him down in the most public, over-the-top way possible. But then when he found out that he was a Jewish person that was doing this number at him, he then devised a plan to have King Xerxes make the order to kill all the Jews in the Persian kingdom. Yes.
Okay, I knew about the order, but I didn't know about the original gallows
Yes.
of it being 75 feet high.
Yes.
For what reason?
Because-
I mean, I know you said to like publicly humiliate him, but it could have, the same thing could have been achieved.
I mean, a
with way
regular
less.
gallows. I mean, Haman
Yeah.
was an extra fella. Like
He
I
really
mean,
was.
Weird flex, but okay.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So all the things happen. Just to back up. So,
I'm sorry, I
however,
threw you
no,
off.
you're good. So, however, all things like God's not mentioned specifically in the book of Esther, but you can kind of see his hand at play, like under the radar, behind the scenes. So, however, divine intervention played a role. Haman thwarted the plan that these guys had hatched to kill the king. Esther eventually revealed, plot twist, that she is actually a Jewish person. And she revealed that at a banquet that they held for Haman after he saved the king. And then here in Esther 7, verse 7, that's where we're going to pick up here. So she revealed how Mordecai was going to be her undoing, and this order was going to impact her and Mordecai and all the other people. And so in chapter 7, verse 7, and the king arose in his wrath from his 2 days of wine drinking now. So, and the king arose in his wrath from the wine drinking and went into the palace garden. But Haman stayed to beg for his life from Queen Esther, for he saw that harm was determined against him by the king. And the king returned from the palace garden to the place where they were drinking wine, as Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. And the king said, will he even assault the queen in my presence in my own house? And as the words left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, said, moreover, the gallows that Haman has prepared for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, is standing at Haman's house 50 cubits high, which is roughly 75 feet. And the king said, hang him on that. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai, and then the wrath of the king abated.
So...
So he did not end well.
He really didn't. In the VeggieTales version of this, just if you want like the softer version of Haman's fate, he actually got banished to the land of being tickled 24/7 with a feather. And so, and actually it scared me as a child. These little characters came in with like their hoods. See, Sarah knows what's going on over there. She's like, yeah. They had like these little creepy hoods on, and they came in with a feather. And of course they're vegetables, so they don't have arms. It's just this floating feather that's just like... and Mordecai, no, not Mordecai, sorry, Haman, who is being played by don't tell me, the guy who loves his cheeseburger.
I'm not
Are you
familiar?
Following with me? I love my cheeseburger.
Yes.
That guy. Anyways,
That
he goes,
guy.
Okay, as
out
long
of
as-
the doorway. He's like, so that was a long way to say that was the only thing running through my head as you were reading the real version of this.
Okay.
Was Esther an asparagus? What was Esther?
Oh, I think she's a sweet pea.
Sarah,
no,
please
she
put
was
that
an
up somewhere
asparagus.
in here.
I think I'll look it up.
It's a great classic VeggieTales movie.
Okay.
10 out of 10.
Anyway,
Yeah,
so
sorry.
there's now
I'm so sorry.
went
Michael.
way sideways. So now there's a feast of Purim that Orthodox Jews and maybe Jewish people as a whole, they celebrate each year to remember how they were saved from Haman's evil plots and schemes. But that's definitely a bruised ego that just caused him to go, in my reading of it, completely over the top. Like one dude decides not to bow down to you, so you erect like the world's biggest gallows and then plot to have all of his people's just... What is she laughing at back there?
Now we're looking at
So-
more characters from
Okay,
VeggieTales.
so they're also right here. This is the VeggieTale pictures of Haman and he radically different fate.
You're welcome for the little spice that I added on top of that. I'm sorry I derailed you so much.
Madison took your very serious Bible breakdown and said, add a little spice
and
in
hit
here.
one
Here
of
we
these
go.
situations.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, I had
so
too
yes.
much caffeine.
No, you're good. You're good. So that's Haman, and that's what can happen if your ego is way inflated and way big. I mean, there's some good things Haman obviously was good at his job there. You know, I mean, he rose through the ranks, did the things, but had a very fragile ego that at the smallest slight went sideways mega fast.
He really said, let me try genocide.
Yeah, pretty much.
So now we're going to look at Madison's going to talk about Samson.
Okay, so Samson is an interesting person. We're talking through some of our folks who didn't, quote unquote, didn't end well, and we're kind of progressing as we go into some more cheerful stories, or not cheerful, but ends on a good note, even though in their overall story of their life, we can see how maybe they should have made some better choices.
Yeah.
Samson is an interesting character for us to look at because even though he made some very bad decisions, it's like you're thinking of a graph. Here's Samson in the Bible, and then it's real bad, but then he kind of ends pretty good. Sort of.
He has some peaks and valleys like we all do.
Yeah.
So this is, I'm going to introduce his character with a quote from the New Unger's Bible Dictionary. We'll have my references listed below, so I'm not going to read them all off every time. But the renowned judge and deliverer of Israel, Samson, was the son of Manoah of Zorah in the tribe of Dan, whose birth was foretold to his parents by an angel, accompanied with the announcement that he was to be a Nazarite to God from the womb. Samson grew up under special influences of the Spirit of God and was at last impelled to commence the conflict with the Philistines, which only terminated with his death. What the heck does that mean? So that was like the first thing that I read before I switched to reading into the Bible, and I was like, what does impel mean? How does that compare to the word compel? Because he was impelled, not compelled. But fun fact, compel means to constrain someone in some way to yield or do what one wishes. Fate compels us to face danger and trouble. Impel means to provide a strong force, motive, or incentive towards a certain end. So even though as we read more about Samson and we figure out what his storyline was like, God had like this ultimate plan for his life, but he wasn't forcing him to do this. You'll hear in some of the scriptures that we read that the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. So I think of it as like him just going like, but he wasn't being forced to.
Yes.
Just interesting. So he was the second to last judge. Samuel was actually the last judge who comes after Samson, and he was appointed by God to protect Israel in a military capacity before they threw a fit, because they wanted a king, but whatever, it's to be told eventually. Basically, we have like a line of judges in the Old Testament that come before we actually bring in a king, and the only reason why a king was even brought in is because the Israelites were being little babies.
We want to be like everybody else.
Yeah. So he was supposed to be a Nazirite from womb to tomb, and he absolutely was not. Nice. What is a Nazirite? Good question. I'm so glad you guys asked. You can read in Numbers, number 6, 1 through 21 gives like the full information on what it actually means to be under the Nazirite vow. But the short version is he couldn't drink alcohol, he couldn't be around dead bodies, and he could not cut his hair. So he was under the Nazirite vow from birth, and because he followed this Nazirite vow, he had superhuman strength. So the first scripture we're going to look at is Judges 14:6. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion to pieces as one tears a young goat.
Yeah.
I mean, I've probably seen a lion at like the zoo or something, but I have no frame of reference right now for how big a lion is. But if I think of tearing a young goat, even that feels very impossible. Anyways, crazy.
Yes.
He said, hold on, let me go sicko mode. That was the Spirit of the Lord rushing upon him, was him going sicko mode. So basically, after he just annihilates this lion, the story transitions into him really wanting to get married, and there's some drama. Again, you can read all about him in Judges. We're not going to get into all of it, but
it's something.
He's angry. He's angry because of multiple reasons, but we're going to pick back up in Judges 15:14. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. The Philistines are the bad guys. The Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became as flax that had caught fire, and his bonds melted off his hands, and he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey. Hey, where did he get that?
I mean, they just lie about, I mean.
Yeah, I have one in my car.
I literally stepped over 3 from the car to the door of the building.
Gross. So he finds this, not only is it a jawbone, it's a fresh jawbone.
Yes.
That's so gross. He put out his hand and he took it. So he's like, hey, you're mine now. And then he used it to strike 1,000 men. Yeah.
Just the endurance that takes is something.
Crazy. And now, after after he has this whole thing, there's more women drama. He falls in love with Delilah. And the Philistines, the bad guys, go to Delilah and they're like, hey, can you ask him where he gets his strength from? We'll give you money. And Delilah signed up for it. So this is the largest chunk of scripture that I'll read, but it's from when he tells Delilah his secret to the end. So we're gonna pick up Judges 16:15 through 30, just in case anybody is curious how I feel about him telling Delilah. My point above this scripture was he tells her parentheses dumb.
Well, there was a gross in there somewhere too.
Oh yeah, there was. Honestly, my notes for this week were a little unhinged. It's okay. All right. Judges 16, verse 15. When Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up again, for he has told me all his heart, a.k.a. he finally told her the truth about how he has his strength. Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands. She made him sleep on her knees, and she called a man and had him shave off the 7 locks on his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left. And she said, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." And he awoke from his sleep and said, "I will go out at other times and shake myself free. I will go out as at other times and shake myself free." So he's like saying, they can capture me, whatever, but I'll be fine.
No big
because
deal.
I can melt them off my wrists. I don't know. And the Philistines seized him. Hold on. Did I skip ahead? He woke from his sleep
You're
and
at
said,
20.
Yep.
Okay, but he did not know that the Lord had left him. Oh,
Yikes.
yeah. I wonder why. And the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze shackles. And he ground at the mill in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Now the lords of the Philistines gathered to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice. And they said, "Our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hand." And when the people saw him, they praised their God. For they said, "Our God has given our enemy into our hand, the ravager of our country, who has killed many of us." And when their hearts were merry, they said, "Call Samson, that he may entertain us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he entertained them. They just wanted to bully him publicly. That's what entertaining means.
It's not like he was juggling or anything.
Yeah, no. They were just like, haha. He was a bad guy, but we got him. Samson said to the young man who held him by the hand, "Let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them." Now the house was full of men and women, and the lords of the Philistines were there, and on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women who looked on while Samson entertained. Then Samson called to the Lord and said, "O Lord God, please remember me, and please strengthen me. Only this once, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." And Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested, and he leaned his weight against them, his right hand on one and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he bowed with all his strength, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he had killed during his life. So, wow.
And it's so weird because, it wasn't. You put dumb there, and I think that really understates how stupid that was. Because, if you go back and you read a little bit, she pulled this scheme 2 times already.
Yep.
Where he told her something fake. "The Philistines are upon you, Samson," and then he wakes up, does his thing, and then
Well, it also did say, I missed the scripture. I was going to put it in, but I think I ended up taking it out, that basically she annoys him into telling her.
Yes.
And it's like when he's vexed, or it was like he's basically so annoyed that he finally told her. However, I do think that there is a certain amount of, there's a lack of priorities that we can see in his life based on some of his previous choices made concerning women.
Yeah, he sees what he wants, and then he wants it, and then he goes after it.
Yep.
And just everything else doesn't matter.
So one of the things that I've always wondered about this story is how he managed to go from losing all of his strength to being able to push down 2 pillars. And part of it that had never really clicked in my head until I read what I'm about to quote, also from the references that'll be available down below. The mention of Samson's name in the list of ancients, which is a verse in Hebrews 11:32, they list out ancients who by faith conquered kingdoms and performed acts of righteousness. So New Testament is referring back to Samson and saying, by faith he conquered kingdoms and performed acts of righteousness. It warrants us a favorable estimate of his character as a whole. And yet, the inspired narrative records infirmities that must forever mar the luster of his heroic deeds. God take the good with the bad really ruins the good that he did do for Israel. And Samson the Nazarite in Samson the Nazarite, we see a man towering in supernatural strength through his firm faith in and confident reliance upon the gift of God committed to him.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, we see Samson as an adventurous, foolhardy, passionate, and willful man, dishonoring and frittering away his God-given power by making it subservient to his own lusts.
What a human person that is.
Right. So I had never, the thing that I discovered while reading through this story that just kind of blew my mind was that he didn't just last-ditch effort, I'm going to use the very little bit of strength that I have left to trap these people, which for some reason was always what was in my mind. But it was because he was in captivity and his hair started to grow again. He was therefore under that Nazarite vow again, and that allowed his close connection with God to return. And then God was on his side because he was following the rules that God gave him. Because like usually Nazarites, when they take that vow, it's temporary and you're not under it from birth for your whole life, and it's voluntary.
Yes.
But he was told he had to be a Nazarite for his entire life, and when he made the decision to step away from that, he lost God. So he let his own desires and his own interests take over, and it wasn't until he finally submitted back to God again that he was able to fulfill God's plan for taking down the Philistines.
Well, how about that?
Yeah, last ditch effort.
I mean, he's a very human character, and whenever I look at a lot of the Old Testament people, I think one of the things that's so refreshing and so real about them is that they don't just whitewash them.
Yeah.
Like, they don't whitewash David, they don't whitewash Samson, they don't whitewash any of them. And I think it makes them that much more relatable. And for me, whenever I read it, I'm like, my gosh, God used someone with all of these character flaws. You're going to be able to relate to one of them on something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And if God could use that person with that flaw that I can identify with and that I see me in, it means that I'm not just written off.
Yeah.
Like, that there's still a way for God to use me, just like he used Samson there. And I think the fact that, I mean, he had every right in the world to feel forsaken. He had his eyes gouged out. He couldn't see anything. He was being mocked. He was probably strapped to something that he was pushing around to mill grain.
Which I also read predominantly like a woman's task,
Yes.
which was therefore further humiliating, like public humiliation for him.
Yes.
So he was getting it from all sides.
And the fact that he still felt like he could call on God and that God would deliver him in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
Like, that's a powerful testament to where he was at and the faith that he had.
Yeah.
So
But
I think there's a
also-
lot there. Like, yes, I get your
There's-
point about where they focus on like all of the bad.
Yeah.
But I think that's like a Rorschach test for like what are you actually looking for in in the story.
There's so much there. Even there's stuff from before he was even born with his parents, basically. From my understanding when I read it, seemingly making godly choices for the first time, because they are kind of confronted with an angel of the Lord for the first time, and they're like, they make the choices that they're told to make, and they worship God because they get to see an angel. There's just so much that I can't even really get into in this story that really was interesting to me. So I highly recommend digging into that.
For sure.
Super cool. But it makes me wonder what could his life story have been like if he had have been willing to put God before his own interests and his own lusts and the things that he wanted. And are there things that I'm putting before God? Ouch.
Take it away.
I don't know how to follow that up except to just move on, honestly. So
We're transitioning to another bit of an unhinged character.
yes, indeed, we are. So we got to talk about King Saul. There's two Sauls in the Bible, and in case you're confused, one in the Old Testament, one in the New Testament. This is the Old Testament Saul, and it kind of follows up what you mentioned at the beginning of talking about Samson.
Yes.
So we have the judges. The last couple were Samson and Samuel. Samuel's the last one. He also is the guy who kind of receives Israel saying, "We want a king. We want a king."
And he's like,
Yeah, he's like, whatever, bro. Like, he tries to fight them, and they're like, no, we want it. Okay, so.
And God gives him an out. God gives him an out. He's like, listen, it ain't because they're rejecting you. They're for real deal rejecting me. So don't take it personally, Samuel. Like, you're okay.
It's not you, it's me.
Yes.
So God sends Samuel to go find the king of Israel, the first king of Israel. And so we pick it up in 1 Samuel chapter 9, starting in verse 1. There was a wealthy, influential man named Kish from the tribe of Benjamin. He was the son of Abiel, son of Zeror, son of Becherath, son of Aphiah, the tribe of Benjamin. His son, Saul, was the most handsome man in Israel, head and shoulders taller than anyone else.
You handled that like a pro.
you really like
Thanks.
muscle
I tried.
him. Yeah.
So there's the guy. He's tall, he's handsome, he's taller than everybody else. He looks just like a king you'd expect a king to look, I guess. So
In that time, he was like 5'8".
yeah, right.
Head and shoulders above everybody else.
So fast forward to the beginning of the next chapter. Samuel took a flask of olive oil, and poured it over Saul's head. I just was buffering right there. I don't know what
He's
happened.
doing
and
so
you got
good.
all of those names work so well.
He poured the olive oil on Saul's head. He kissed him, not in a weird way, like in a cultural, hey, you're king way, and said, I am doing this because the Lord has appointed you to be the ruler over Israel, his special possession. So, cool.
I'm glad
He's
you
king.
clarified because everybody would have.
Not in a weird way.
So, Samuel's like, yo, yeah, you're going to be king. All right, cool. But then, the first sign of trouble.
And Saul did one of those.
Me? I'm going to be king. So, not long after, the first sign of trouble pops up. This is in 1 Samuel chapter 10, starting in verse 20. So, Samuel has kind of recognized Saul as, okay, you're going to be the king, but now we got to bring everybody together and make it official, right? So Samuel brought all the tribes of Israel before the Lord, and the tribe of Benjamin was chosen by lot. Then he brought each family of the tribe of Benjamin before the Lord, and the family of the Matrites was chosen. And finally Saul, son of Kish, was chosen from among them, but when they looked for him, he had disappeared. So they asked the Lord, where is he? And the Lord replied, he is hiding among the baggage. So they found him and brought him out, and he stood head and shoulders above everyone else. Then Samuel said to all the people, this is the man the Lord has chosen as your king. No one in Israel is like him. And all the people shouted, long live the king.
Why does it sound like fan fiction being written about Saul? They're like, by the way, he was taller than everyone else.
Like, bro, he was so tall. Oh my gosh. So, from the very beginning, Saul seems very insecure.
Maybe he told them to make sure they wrote down that he was taller than everybody else.
Maybe.
All right, if you're
going
gonna say that I'm hiding among the baggage, you have to make sure to point out that I was tall. I don't know. I just imagine just a bunch of sacks and just Saul crouched down, behind them. Where's our king? He's hiding behind that bag right there.
I think he's over there. What's he doing?
Just crouching.
But he's tall.
But he's tall.
But he's tall. So Saul, there's no reason to think why he would be hiding or why he would be not excited about this. But here he is at kind of his coronation in front of everybody, and he's hiding. It's almost like he felt some kind of way and didn't feel up to the task, And so that manifested for him very early. So his reign starts out well enough. He wins some military victories for Israel, but kind of along the way, some of the red flags start to pop up. Some more of the red flags start to pop up. Namely, Saul repeatedly disobeying God. So, that's its own thing that we don't have time to get into at here. But after a few instances of this, God rejects Saul as king, and he removes his anointing from Saul. He says, you're not the guy that I'm choosing anymore to be the king.
Ugh.
And goes way far the other way. Because,
Yeah.
it's interesting because here it starts out, there was a wealthy, influential man man named Kish from the tribe, and he had a son.
Mm-hmm.
His son Saul was the most handsome man in Israel. And then the polar opposite of that was a poor, small, short.
Who Samuel didn't even think was.
Yes.
He was like, what? This
So,
son?
Yeah. So, I mean, he went completely the other way.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So the awkward thing about this is God removes his anointing from Saul, but Saul continues to be the king until further notice, which is just makes for an awkward situation, you know?
Yes.
So God anoints David to be the next king. And, you know, if you would like to go in depth on David, we did a 2-part episode
We
on
did.
David. So,
I'm not in it, so.
But check out part 2.
yes. So, like, I'm going to leave out a lot of the detail. Go check it out there. God anoints David to be the king. He's a super unlikely choice, right? And because Saul, like what I did there, an Easter egg?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Check out our Unlikely
yeah,
series.
Go to the YouTube channel. You'll see what I'm talking about. So Saul is still the king, and David kind of slowly becomes a part of Saul's inner circle. Saul is tormented by evil spirits, so it's kind of like God removes his anointing, and some evil spirits come and replace it. So Saul is really tormented by these evil spirits, but David comes along to play the lyre or the harp to soothe him. They need a lyre player. It just so happens that David's good at everything, including this, and he's
good
the guy.
at killing giants,
Yeah.
collecting all sorts of things.
Right.
And yes.
Okay, so speaking of giants, David defeats Goliath, who is kind of the Philistines, the bad guys still, the Philistines, like, fighting champion. So after that happens, this is in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 6. When the victorious Israelite army was returning home, gosh, I cannot talk anymore. I did the names and everything else is bad. All right.
Shake
They're
it off.
returning home after David had killed the Philistine, Goliath. Women from all the towns of Israel came out to meet King Saul. They sang and danced for joy with tambourines and cymbals. And this was their song. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s.
Oh!
Gets smoked.
Oh!
This made Saul very angry. What's this, he said. They credit David with 10,000s and me with only thousands. Next, they'll be making him their king. Foreshadowing. So from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. And, just one eye.
He's got to keep one eye out for Selena.
He probably had the earring. That was the jealous eye. He had the earring.
Yeah.
Yes. I
There
just
we
figured
go.
it out. There we go.
That was funny. Took me a second.
So this just kind of like, the situation just kind of gets worse from here. Saul tries to kill David a couple of times, but in 1 Samuel chapter 19 and verse 9,
I got a whole bunch of
Yeah.
times.
it says, But one day when Saul was sitting at home with spear in hand, the tormenting spirit from the Lord suddenly came upon him again. As David played his harp, see, they just called it a harp that time. What the heck? As David played his harp, Saul hurled his spear at David, but David dodged out of the way, swoop, and leaving the spear stuck in the wall, he fled and escaped into the night. So Saul would, again, leaving out a bunch of detail, go watch the David 2-part episode. Saul would continue to hunt David until his eventual death. So I think Saul's downfall ultimately came down to insecurity about who he was, his position that was kind of put upon him, and having this guy behind him who would eventually succeed him, who he just felt like could do no wrong, essentially, and was better in all the areas than he was.
I mean, and it's not like God removed him from his position.
Right.
Like, he still could have stayed there. Like, just kind of like if we were going to look at, like, what could Saul have done? Like, he still could have been like, okay, I'm still the king. I still have a chance to do things right here. Like, we still have a standing order to go out and get rid of the Philistines and the Amalekites and all the things. Like, let me surround myself with some people who can help me make that happen.
Or how about now that I know that God has identified the next king, let me pour into him.
Let's mentor him and bring him along.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I also haven't had to live through that perspective of the next generation kind of coming up. Like I haven't had to do that before, so I can imagine it would be really difficult to be like, this thing that I'm passionate about, somebody else is really good at it. I think I would probably be insecure too.
And not to go too far into it, but like even the thing where, Saul was supposed to wait to make an offering to God until Samuel came along. Like, his fear that God wasn't actually going to take care of him because he felt deficient in some way led him to try to do it himself, which is what was like the precipitating factor to, nah, dog, you're
That's
done.
very relatable for me.
Yes.
And to y'all's point, I think it's 13 years that passed between when David is anointed and when he actually becomes king.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
Saul was king until then, so he had plenty left to do even after God took the anointing from him. But he was just completely overcome by insecurity.
And the only thing that meant was your house isn't going to keep doing this. Like, it's going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like, you're not, like, it doesn't
Like
remove.
lineage change.
Yes. And so
It's not
that's all that meant. It didn't necessarily mean, like, I hate you.
Yeah, or like God's like, you can't be king anymore.
Yes.
Like,
You still get to be king. It's just not going to stick with your house.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate, I think, to all of these characters. In some world, that I don't know Jesus. I probably would go as heavy in the ego as Haman did. Like, I can be a very angry person, like a very petty person. Thankfully, I have Jesus.
I mean, I have the capacity to act out of spite. I don't know if it would go to that. Like, I can't imagine in what universe, but I mean, we're all just one degree removed from doing something outrageous.
That's true.
Yeah.
Basically, all three of these characters are very, very relatable for me.
Yeah. I can really relate to Saul from the aspect of insecurity. I something I deal with constantly. Like, there's lots of I'll never be good enough, or I'll never learn and grow thoughts that rattle around in my brain. And that's like all areas of my life, like my own personal growth, my marriage, my professional growth, and so on and so forth. And it's kind of like Saul, it causes me to like doubt myself or my ability to do things well, or like if an opportunity comes up, I can very easily talk myself out of being a good fit for that opportunity. Like, oh well, like that'd be cool, but like I'm not gonna get picked, or I'm not a good fit for that because of X, Y, and Z.
Or that negative critic,
Yes.
like lives rent free in my dome.
Yeah.
Like all day.
I definitely get that. I struggle with insecurity for sure, but I think the character that I relate to the most is Samson. Like, I think because I was raised in faith, that like mirrors in him how he was raised straight out the womb, being set apart and knowing better and all of this stuff that I had the opportunity to be exposed to sooner, but because of my own desires and because I wanted the bad things more, I had portions of time where I would walk away from my faith or just be like, God and I are on cool terms, we'll catch up when I get to it. But like, if I don't prioritize him and put him first, I'm missing out on what a life could be like when I am walking in unison with God.
Yeah.
Well, and we want to know who you guys relate to the most, so leave that in the comments. But check out this clip from one of our teaching pastors.
When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, in front of everybody now, Simon, son of John, and that was his name also. He called him Simon and Peter. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And at this, Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. In case you're wondering, Jesus is not hard of hearing when he asks Peter the same question 3 times. He does it on purpose. Peter gets insulted, but Jesus is trying to recondition Peter's preconditioned reflex. See, Peter denies Jesus, even knowing him, 3 times. And Jesus recommissions him to ministry 3 times. And the best part of this story is in the verse that I didn't read to you, verse 4, which tells us that this conversation right here happened very early in the morning. In other words, Jesus reinstates Peter while the roosters are still crowing. Looks him right in the eye, just like he did on that awful day of Peter's failure. And he essentially says, you thought I was through with you, but I forgive you and I restore you and I love you. And I'm even going to use that failure to do great things through you. That's what forgiveness looks like. From that moment on, the rooster's crow no longer represented Peter's guilt. It now stood for God's grace and forgiveness. It was not the sound of horror anymore. Now it was the sound of healing. Jesus chose that particular place, that particular time, that particular audience because he knew that Peter needed a reconditioning of his reflexes, and Jesus, as always, knew just how to do it. But this wasn't just about Peter. It was about the others too. When Jesus forgave and restored Peter, those other disciples, they were sitting there. They were watching. They were listening. Jesus' forgiveness of Peter was supposed to be an example to be followed by the rest of his followers. Followers like you and me.
Well, just a quick recap just to keep everybody up to speed on the story. So what Brian was talking about there was Peter denied knowing Jesus 3 times after his arrest because he feared getting arrested along with him and executed. So Peter denied him 3 times. So when Jesus came back and met with his apostles, that's where Brian's story picked up. Mm-hmm. But the thing that I really think jumped out to me in that is, Brian mentioned how that story wasn't just meant for the people there. It was also meant for us as well. And so these stories that we looked at in the Old Testament, they weren't just for the original listeners or to the readers. They were meant for us as well, so that way we could see ourselves in them. Yeah. And the fact that if you're watching this and you're listening to this, no matter which one of those characters and their flaws that you relate to, we all mentioned the ones that we were able to relate to.
All of them.
Every single one of them in some form or fashion.
Yep.
Yeah. It's not too late.
Yeah.
You don't have to go the route that any of those people did, although those were massive examples, but those same things pop up in all the little actions and decisions and choices that we make as well. So that's really what I took from Brian's message clip right there.
I love that statement of it's never too late. Yes. That's such a powerful I get little chills when I think about all of the things that I've done that I know I have been washed away, and the fact that every day I get to wake up to a clean slate and start the day fresh, but then also know that even if I did completely walk away from God and faith, and I made horrible decisions and I wrecked my life, it still wouldn't be too late. Yes. God would still take me back. And I just think that's so cool.
It's awesome. I think with the characters we looked at and others, we talked about earlier, the Old Testament this is the story of the Old Testament, people messing up. And I think it's, there were opportunities for those people to change course and to get to a place where they didn't end well. And I think kind of the arc of, if this is a way we could summarize kind of the arc of the Bible of this is how it looked for these people before Jesus, but then Jesus came. And now, because we have Jesus, it's never too late for us. That's pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's a good spot to land.
Yeah.
So leave us a review, and if we read it, we will send you one of our awesome mugs. Share, subscribe, all the things.
Thank you for putting up with me.
And we'll see you next week on the After Chat.
Thanks for joining us for the After Chat. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To be the first to hear our next episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button and get notifications for new content. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram at PCC Wired and Facebook at Passion Community Church. For additional resources and links, check out the description. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on The After Chat.